The snow in the gods wood fell in slow, deliberate flakes, as if the sky itself were pausing to listen. John stood beneath the heart tree with his cloak drawn tight, breath steaming in the cold air, Ghost a white shadow at his side. The red leaves whispered in a wind he could not feel. The carved face in the weirwood watched him with eyes that seemed more crimson than sap. He had stood here as a boy, mouthing half-remembered prayers. He had stood here as Lord Commander, begging for guidance he never received. Now, as king in the north, he had come not to pray, but to ask a question he no longer knew how to frame. "I died," he said quietly, eyes on the face in the bark. "You know that. If you're watching, if you ever were. I died, and something brought me back." He did not name the red god. He did not name the woman with the shadow in her eyes. Melisandre had told him R'hllor had returned him to life for a purpose. Perhaps that was true, but when John thought of that night, of the knife, of the darkness, of the nothing, there was no fire in his memory. There was only cold, a soft, endless cold that felt very much like snow. The leaves rustled again. It might have been the wind. It might have been his imagination, but the sound changed as he listened. It gathered, focused like many voices trying to speak through a single throat. "John." The whisper came from nowhere and everywhere at once. It was not a voice he knew. It was not a man's or a woman's. It was the sigh of high branches in winter, the groan of old roots deep in the earth. Ghost's ears pricked, hackles rising, but the direwolf did not snarl. He stared at the heart tree, pale eyes bright. John's hand went to Longclaw's hilt. It felt foolish as soon as he did it, yet his fingers tightened all the same. "You hear me," he said. "If you're not just ghosts in leaves." The carved eyes bled sap. John had seen it before, as a boy hiding here when he did not wish to be found. But tonight it seemed to flow faster, trickling down like tears. "The cold took you," the whisper said. "The fire claimed you, but you belong to the living." "I belong to my people," John answered, heart pounding. "To the north, to the men and women freezing beyond my walls while I talk to a tree. Their blood runs in your veins. Their dead sleep in our roots. You have always been ours." "We?" John asked. The leaves shivered. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed. He was Jon Snow no longer, not merely. He was the boy under this very tree, shivering and alone, listening to Robb promise never to leave him behind. He was the young man on the wall, fingers numb on frozen stone, frost thick in his beard. He was the leader kneeling beside burned bodies at Castle Black, smelling charred flesh and old secrets, all of it at once. He was not alone. Behind his memories were others. Faces he did not know, lives that were not his. Men in furs praying around standing stones long before Winterfell was raised. A woman with moss in her hair pressing her brow to a tree older than the wall. A spearwife screaming a curse at some southern lord. A boy with a birch bough laughing as his arrow pierced a weirwood's eye. "Always ours," the whisper repeated. John tore himself free of the vision with a gasp. His knees hit the snow. Ghost pressed against him, a steadying weight. He did not feel fire in his chest. He felt roots. "Why now?" he demanded. "Why speak to me now?" "Because the fire stirs," said the old, cold voice. "Because it has chosen its own. Because it would burn us from the world to claim what is coming." A flicker of heat touched the edge of his vision, though the gods would remained white and still. For the briefest moment, John saw something that was not there. A woman standing where the pool should be, her hair silver, her eyes amethyst, her hand raised, a ring of searing flame around her. Then she was gone like a ghost in smoke. John's lips formed a name he did not understand, and the taste of it on his tongue was Dragonfire. He pushed himself to his feet, shaking. The heart tree watched him in silence. "If the fire comes," John said hoarsely, "it comes to fight the dead. That's what the Red Woman said. That's what she saw in her flames. The dead are an ache in our roots," the voice of the weirwood said. "An old wound. Fire would sear it closed and leave the flesh charred. We would mend it, We have mended the world before. Ice and earth, blood and bone, not flame. The White Walkers, Jon said. The others. 100 whispers answered at once. Names in a language he did not know, old words for old enemies. Some like curses, some like prayers. They were made to answer a war, the Weirwoods murmured. Misused, unbound. The circle was broken. Their cold is an insult to our sleep. They would turn all flesh into stone and all breath into silence to end a pain they do not understand. Then help us stop them, Jon said. Help me stop them. I don't care about your quarrel with some Eastern god. I care about my people staying alive. Your people are our roots and leaves, the voice said. The fire god cares only for the burning of one night. His light blazes and then is gone. We endure. We remember. Jon thought of Melisandre's face when she spoke of her visions, of Stannis burning men on Dragonstone's beach, of the warmth that had rushed through his frozen veins when his lungs filled for the first time after death. He owed that god something, whether he liked it or not. I won't choose between you, he said. You say I'm yours, and your priests say I'm his. I'm Jon Snow, Jon Stark, if the North will have me. I was born in blood and ice, not in fire or in bark. I'll do what's needed to stop the dead. If either of you gets in the way of that. He trailed off, aware of how absurd his threat sounded. A man telling a god to move aside, yet the words felt right in his mouth. The leaves rustled in something that might almost have been amusement. You are our root in the walking world, the voice said. The fire claims you as its spark. The dead hunger for your breath. All things that war for the world seek a piece of you. That is why we speak now. War comes, Jon of Winterfell, not only of men and others, of gods and ghosts. The fire will send its champion. We send you. I didn't ask. You died, the whisper said, and in those two words Jon felt something vast and patient regard him. You were free. You came back. You stand in our snow and speak to our face. Choice lies in your hands. That is all we give and all we ask. The presence faded. The Godswood became only a stand of trees again. The heart tree's eyes were once more just red sap. The air seemed emptier for their absence. Ghost nudged his hand. Jon realized his fingers were shaking and forced them still. Come, he muttered. We have enough enemies without adding gods to the list. He left the Godswood with the feeling that something had shifted. Not in the trees, but in him. The old gods had never spoken to him in all the years he had whispered his troubles to their painted face. Now they had, and he did not know if he felt chosen or trapped. As he stepped back into the outer ward, the real world crashed over him in sound and motion. Men shouted, hammers rang, dogs barked. Winterfell was busy even deep into the night. The North prepared, always prepared, for the war Jon had seen coming long before any god bothered to say a word. Jon! He turned as Sansa descended the steps from the great keep, her cloak a deep gray trimmed in white fur, her hair the color of fallen autumn leaves. 2 guards trailed her, trying and failing to look as if their presence did not matter. You're supposed to be sleeping, she said, her lips tightening as she looked at the circles under his eyes. Or at least pretending enough that the men think you are. A king who never rests isn't a comfort. He's a worry. Kings who sleep too much end up like Robert, Jon said. Sansa's mouth quirked. Robert never slept enough either. He drank until he fell over. That's not rest, Jon. That's escape. I'm not escaping, he said before he could stop himself. She studied him. Her eyes were not their mother's exactly, but they had Catelyn's sharpness. You went to the Godswood again, she observed. You always look colder when you come back from there, as if they took some of your warmth and didn't give it back. Maybe they need it more, Jon said. He hesitated, then shook his head. It's nothing. Nothing sent you out in the middle of the night? Sansa said. Nothing puts that look on your face? Her voice held neither mockery nor softness, only a weary insistence. She had learned to see through lies in places far crueler than Winterfell's courtyards. They spoke, Jon said abruptly. Saying it out loud made it sound foolish, but the words were out now. The trees, the old gods, or something in them. Sansa's brows rose, but she did not laugh. What did they say? That I belong to them. He let out a breath that misted in the cold air. That there's going to be a war, not just with the dead, with some fire god from the east. Sansa's gaze flicked toward the distant shape of the wall, invisible in the night. Melisandre's god. Aye. And we're between them. Aye. Sansa closed her eyes for a moment, drawing a breath. When she opened them again, there was a familiar Stark acceptance there, a quiet readiness for bad news. Then we'll do what Starks have always done, she said. We'll stand in the middle and make sure the North doesn't burn or freeze to satisfy someone else's quarrel. He almost smiled. That easy then? Nothing's easy, she replied. But we're not priests. We're not sorcerers. We're not gods. We're Starks. Let them squabble over who owns your soul if they must. They don't own your choices. Come inside. There's a raven from the south I think you should see. He followed her into the great hall, the warmth of the fires almost painful after the chill outside. Men rose as he passed. Some bowed their heads. Some clapped him on the shoulder. The room hummed with the low murmur of conversation, the clatter of trenchers, the crackle of logs. Davos stood near the hearth, a scroll in hand. He looked up as Jon approached, his lined face grave. From the Citadel, Lord, Your Grace, he corrected himself. The title still sat awkwardly on his tongue. Samwell Tarly wrote it, or tried to. There's more ink blots than proper letters in some parts, but I reckon I've picked out the sense of it. Jon's chest tightened at Sam's name. He took the scroll and scanned the familiar, awkward hand. Sansa watched his face. What does he say? She asked. That he's well, Jon said automatically. He swallowed. That the Maesters are fools who won't listen, but he's found things. Old records about the Long Night. Some about Dragonglass. Some about others. His eyes moved to a cramped line near the bottom. And one other thing, he says. There are red priests in Old Town now, from Volantis, preaching about a coming war between their god and the false spirits of the frozen north. Davos scratched his beard. That'll be the Lord of Light's lot, then. I've heard their kind talk in the free cities. They always sound like they're on the winning side, right up until their king gets his head chopped off. They preach that their god will cleanse the world in fire, Sansa said quietly, and the old gods are tied to the north. So of course we're false spirits. Jon thought of the vision in the Godswood. The silver-haired woman ringed in fire. We need to know more about this red god, he said. Not just from Melisandre, from others. Davos nodded slowly. There's a temple in Volantis bigger than most castles. Red priests in every port from Braavos to Lys. If they're talking about your north, the talk will spread. And if their god truly can raise men from the dead. Jon's hand tightened arrow. Uendi the scroll until the parchment crackled. I'm not his, he said. Whatever he did, Davos's single good I met his. Most gods I've heard of don't ask if you want to be theirs, lad. They just take. The old gods said I have a choice, Jon said. That's good of them, Davos replied dryly. Be a rare thing in a god. Sansa moved closer to the fire. If the south is filling with priests who hate the north's gods, that will mean more than burnt effigies. It will mean lords trying to prove their piety. It will mean fires in our forests if they think it wins them favor. And there's still the Dragon Queen. Jon looked up sharply. Dragon Queen? Sansa nodded. A raven from White Harbor 2 days past. Lord Manderly writes that a ship from Braavos brought news. Daenerys Targaryen has taken Meereen. She has dragons, Jon. 3 of them. She's gathering sellswords and ships. The talk in Essos is that she means to come home. She's not home, Davos muttered. Not yet, but if she comes with dragons and an army, she'll be closer to it than anyone else alive. We had Targaryen kings for hundreds of years, Sansa said. If she returns and their red priests are whispering in her ear that the North's gods are enemies of the one true light, then we may have to fight on more fronts than we can count, Jon finished. He remembered again the flicker of the woman in the godswood. Fire around her, fire behind her eyes. The old gods said the fire would send its champion, he said. What if she's the champion? A queen with dragons and a god who speaks in flames. Then we'd best make certain the North has a champion of its own, Davos said quietly, and that he knows what he's fighting for and what he isn't. Jon opened his mouth to answer, but the words stuck. He did not feel like a champion. He felt like a man in the middle of a river, being pulled by currents he could not see. We need Bran, he said abruptly, and Arya, and every Stark we can find. If this is truly between gods, we'll need more than swords. As if the gods had been waiting for that thought, a horn sounded from the gate tower, thin and distant but unmistakable. Not the panicked blare for enemies. A single, steady note. Riders at the gate. Sansa's head turned. At this hour? Open it, Jon said, and bring whoever they are to the hall. He felt it before the doors swung wide. A shift in the air, a strangeness in his bones, as if something old and familiar were stepping through the skin of the world. Bran came into the hall in a cloak of dark gray, flecked with snow. His hair longer than Jon remembered, his face thinner. Meera Reed pushed his chair, her spear strapped to her back. Bran's eyes, gods, his eyes, were older than any boy's had the right to be. Jon, he said. Jon crossed the room in 3 strides and dropped to his knees beside the chair, pulling his brother, no, his cousin, but that truth seemed small now, into a fierce embrace. Bran's body felt frail and thin, but his arms came up around Jon's shoulders with surprising strength. You're alive, Jon said stupidly. So are you, Bran replied, his voice calm, matter-of-fact. You were dead for some time. Jon drew back and looked at him. How do you know that? I saw you. Bran's gaze flicked to the rafters, then to the heart of the fire, then to Ghost, and finally back to Jon. I see many things. Sansa reached them, breathless, eyes wide and shining. She dropped to her knees beside the chair, her hand flying to her mouth. Bran, she whispered. He turned to her, and for just a moment, Jon saw the boy he remembered. The eager child sneaking after Robb with a wooden sword, the dreamer who liked to climb. Sansa, he said, and his voice softened. Jurre taller. You're different, she breathed, tears beginning. He reached out and touched her cheek with fingers that shook just slightly. So are you. The hall faded around them. For a brief span of heartbeats, it was only them. Jon, Sansa, Bran, like a family returned from a dream. Then the rest of the world crashed back in. Men stared. Davos murmured something about miracles. Meera shifted her weight, eyes scanning the room. Jon stood and helped push Bran's chair closer to the fire. You'll tell us everything, he began. Where you've been, what happened beyond the wall. But first, I know what you want to ask, Bran said. About the gods, about the fire. Jon's breath caught. Then tell me. Bran looked into the flames. For an instant they seemed to flicker green, reflecting in his eyes like leaves. There is a tree, he said quietly, beyond the wall, cold as death. Its roots run through the bones of 1,000 years. A man sat in its branches and watched the past and the future and the now all at once. He taught me to do the same. He called himself the Three-Eyed Raven. He was a man once. Now he's something else. I am what comes after him. Jon swallowed. You're a green seer. Bran nodded. And more. I've walked through the roots of the world. I've seen the old gods. They're not gods like the Red God. They don't speak in words or show pictures in flames. They are memory. They are all that has been. They do not plan. They remember. But sometimes, memory becomes will. That sounds like a god to me, Davos muttered. One with a longer view. Lawler is different, Bran went on. His gaze shifted to the coals. He is fire. He is change. He is every choice that burned the world into something new. He does not remember. He only wants. He reaches into the now to pull it toward a future he prefers. He whispers in the ears of men and women who already burn inside. And they fight, Jon said. The old gods and R'hllor, through us. Bran's fingers tightened on the arms of his chair. They fought once long ago, when the first men cut down the trees and bled the land. When the children made the others to stop them and lost control. A man took a sword and drove it into the heart of the one he loved. And in that scream, the old gods and the fire were bound. The sword burned. The snow melted. The others retreated. The man became legend. Azor Ahai, the last hero. Call him what you like. It was the same story. Jon heard the words as if from very far away. You saw this. In dreams, Bran said. In roots. In fire. The story you heard from Melisandre about Azor Ahai and Nissa Nissa. It's one side. The singer's tale of the last hero and his companions is another. Both true in their way. Both wrong in their way. What matters is that blood and love and sacrifice bound the cold and the fire together once. And now those bonds fray. Because of me? Jon asked, the words harsh in his throat. Because you died, Bran said. And because you came back in a way neither side expected. The old gods touched your soul when it left your body. The red god lit your flesh again. You belong to both and neither. They want you, they fear you, and they will use you if they can, as they will use her. Jon knew who Bran meant before he spoke the name. Daenerys Targaryen, Bran said. The Stormborn, mother of dragons. The fire loves her. It sings in her blood. It would make her its blade. Sansa folded her arms, shoulders tight. And what of me? Of Arya? The old gods breathe through your bones, Bran said softly. Through all of us. We are their memory. But Arya is something else too. She's touched by many faces. His gaze grew distant. She's walking a path of death and no one god holds her leash. Jon's head throbbed. You speak of gods as if they're people. They're not, Bran said. They don't love or hate the way we do. They are what the world makes of them. But now, for the first time in a long time, they are awake at the same time. And the dead are marching. And their champions walk the same ground. Then tell us what to do, Sansa said. You see more than any of us. Tell us how to keep our people alive. Bran's eyes focused on her face. I can see roads, Sansa. I can see where they lead most of the time. But I can't walk them for you. There is a road where the fire burns the north to ash and saves the rest of the world. There is a road where the cold swallows everything, and even the gods sleep. There is a road where men burn the gods from the world and rule in their own image for a little while, until they die and nothing remembers them. There is a road where... He hesitated. Where what? Jon pressed. Bran looked at him. Where you and the Dragon Queen refuse to be used. Where you break the sword instead of stabbing it into another heart. Where fire and memory are forced to share a vessel. That road is thin, fragile, could break if you breathe on it too hard. But it's there. Jon felt the weight of the hall pressing down. The mutter of voices seemed very far away. How? He asked. How do we do that? Bran's lips twisted in something like a bitter smile. By doing the hardest thing for Starks and Targaryens to do. By trusting each other. The hall doors opened again. The wind swirled in, flinging snow and cinders. A woman in faded red stepped through, her hair more white than flame now, her eyes shadowed but still bright. Melisandre of Asshai bowed her head slightly, neither humble nor proud. Then perhaps, she said, her soft voice somehow cutting through every other sound. It is time we spoke of trust between fire and snow, across the narrow sea, in a city of leaning brick walls and ash-stained pyramids. Daenerys Targaryen stared into a bowl of fire and saw a wolf. The flickering embers in the brazier licked at the dry wood, tongues of orange and white and blue. The hall of the Temple of the Lord of Light was dark and cavernous. The painted eyes of R'hlloress, many statues staring down from the shadows. The air smelled of incense, of smoke and hot oil and old prayers. Kinvara, high priestess of the Red Temple, knelt beside Daenerys, her own eyes reflecting the flames. Her shaved head gleamed, the tattoos on her face shifting as the firelight danced. "Look," she whispered, "open yourself. The fire wants to speak to you. It has chosen you." Daenerys's fingers were tight on the arms of the wooden chair. Drogon's roar echoed faintly from the distant plaza where he slept, a rumbling reminder of the power she commanded. Yet here, in this dark hall, faced by a god she did not know, she felt suddenly small. "I see shapes," she said reluctantly. "Smoke, shadows." "Not with those eyes," Kinvara murmured. "With the ones in your blood. You are of the dragon's line. You were born in storm and fire. Lawloress light burns in your veins whether you name it or not. There." She pointed, fingers trembling. "Do you see?" Daenerys forced herself to breathe, slow and steady. She let her gaze blur, as she had when she watched her dragons circle the sky, or when she listened to the crash of the sea beyond the walls of Dragonstone in her childhood memories. The flames shifted, lengthening, narrowing. For a heartbeat they were wings, for another, a sword. Then they were a man. A figure stood in the fire, tall and dark, a cloak of shadow around his shoulders, a blade of pale light in his hand. Snow swirled around him, but it did not settle on him, as if the cold itself refused to touch his flesh. A white wolf stalked at his side, eyes like chips of moonstone. Behind him, as Daenerys watched, a forest burned. She flinched, fingers cramping on the chair. The vision wavered, then steadied. The man's face turned, as if he sensed her gaze. For an instant she glimpsed a beard, a strong jaw, eyes as gray as a winter storm. There was pain in those eyes, and stubbornness, and something like her own loneliness. Then the fire hurled her away. Daenerys gasped, hand flying to her chest, and found herself once more in the temple hall, the brazier crackling innocently before her. "What was that?" she demanded, anger rising as much from fear as pride. "How was that?" Kinvara's smile was slow and almost tender. "A piece of your future, Daenerys Stormborn, a shard of a road you have not yet walked. The Lord of Light shows you what may be, to guide your steps." "What may be?" Daenerys repeated, clinging to the words. "Not must be." The forest was burning. Those trees, I've never seen their like. The frozen spirits of the false gods wear those trees as masks, Kinvara said. They are the old powers of the north. They bind men to the past, to stagnation, to death. The Lord of Light seeks to free the world from their grip. They must burn, so that all men may walk in his light. Daenerys thought of the man in the vision again. He had stood before the burning trees, not behind them. As if he were defending or attacking them, she could not say which. "And the man?" she asked. "What is he to me?" Kinvara's gaze warmed. "He is the other half of a prophecy." Daenerys' hand went automatically to the small scar on her hip, where once a Maegie's blood magic had taken her child and her husband from her and replaced them with a dream. "I've heard enough of prophecies," she said, voice sharp. "They promise much and give only ashes. Only if you let others wield them in your name," Kinvara said. "You are Daenerys of House Targaryen. You are blood of the dragon. You are the fire made flesh, Azor Ahai reborn. You were born to burn away the night." Daenerys almost laughed, almost cried. "So say the red priests when they want my favor. So says the fire when it shows you," Kinvara replied calmly. She gestured to the brazier. "Look again. Tell me if you see falsehood." Daenerys hesitated, then forced herself to lean forward. The flames flared, as if sensing her attention. She saw again the man and the wolf, the burning trees, but more now. The man stood on a wall of ice that shattered beneath some unseen force, cracks racing like lightning. Dragons wheeled overhead, not quite like Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion, but kin to them. Giants marched below. Shadows moved in the snow. Beyond them all, Something too vast to name stirred in the dark. An emptiness, a hunger. It frightened her more than the burnt forest, more than the wolf. She jerked back. "Enough," she said, breathless. Kinvara nodded, pleased, as if Daenerys had passed some test. "You see, the cold rises. The dead march. Only fire can stop them. Your fire. His fire." "His?" Daenerys asked. "The man in the snow," Kinvara said. "The king of the frozen forest. The Lord of Light burns in him, too, in his way. But he is divided. There are shadows in his soul that do not belong to us. He will have to choose when the time comes. As you will." Daenerys's hands curled into fists. "I have chosen my whole life," she said. "To flee, to endure, to fight, to free. I will not be told now that my choices belong to some god I've never prayed to." Kinvara bowed her head. "You misunderstand, Your Grace. The Lord of Light does not steal your will. He kindles it. He offers you a road. Others would drag you down by the roots and make you part of their dreaming. We offer you a chance to burn your own path." "You speak much of what others want," Daenerys said. "What do you want, Kinvara?" The priestess's smile was small and sad. "I want the world to survive long enough for my bones to turn to dust in a warm grave instead of standing forever in a field of ice." Daenerys thought of the empty cities she had seen, the ruins that dotted the old Valyrian coast, the tales of the doom, the way the sky had glowed red for days. "Tell me plain," she said. "If I sail for Westeros, will I be fighting that man in the snow or standing beside him?" Kinvara's eyes closed, lashes black against her cheeks. When she opened them again, their depths glowed faintly. "That is the knife's edge," she said. "The Lord of Light would have you stand above him. The old gods would have you stand against him. The world needs you to stand beside him. But men and gods rarely give the world what it needs. They give it what suits them." "Then I will be the one to choose," Daenerys said quietly. "Not your god, not the trees. Me." Kinvara's lips parted, as if to object, then closed again. She inclined her head. "As you say," she murmured. "But when the time comes, Your Grace, choosing may mean turning your dragons against the very heart of winter, against the weirwood forests the north holds sacred, against the faces of the old gods. Can you do that if it is the only way to stop the dead?" Daenerys thought of all she had burned. Slave masters, crucifiers, rebel lords, and would-be thieves. She had burned to free, to break chains. Could she burn a forest, a god, a memory? "If that is the only way," she said slowly, "I will pay that price." Kinvara's smile sharpened. "Then let us make ready for war." The hall at Winterfell felt suddenly too small to contain all that sat within it. Living men and women, a half-god boy in a chair, a foreign witch with fire in her eyes, a king with two gods tugging at his soul, and the memory of a queen he had never met, ringed in flame. Melisandre watched Bran for a long time before she spoke. The last time she had seen Jon Snow, she had stood before him on Castle Black's windswept stones and admitted her failure. She had misread her god's signs. She had thought Stannis Baratheon was the chosen one. Instead, his bones lay somewhere in snow and ash, another man who had burned too much and understood too little. She had left then, half in shame, half in fear. Now the fire had called her back. It had shown her a wolf and a dragon, two faces of the same sword, and a boy with 3 eyes staring from a tree. "You are changed," she said to Bran. "When last I saw you, you were a boy being carried into a snowy courtyard by a green man and a wildling girl. Now I am the 3-eyed raven," Bran said simply. "The last one was a man older than memory," Melisandre murmured. "He dreamed in roots. The fire told us once to seek him, but we were too slow, too blind. Another of Lollarest's mischances. Tell me, Green Seer, do you dream in fire as well?" "Sometimes," Bran said. "Enough to know your god and mine are not enemies by nature. They are different ways the world speaks. But men make them enemies when they seek to claim them." Melisandre's mouth curved faintly. "You speak like a priest, little lord. or like a philosopher scribbling in some maester's tower. "I speak as I must," Bran said. "We don't have time for worship, Lady Melisandre. We have time for choices." She inclined her head. "Then let us choose to make your brother ready." Jon, who had been listening in tight-lipped silence, stiffened. "I've had enough of being made ready," he said. "I was ready when Stannis needed men for his war. I was ready when the Night's Watch chose me. I was ready when my own sworn brothers put knives in me. I'm tired of being someone else's preparation." Melisandre turned to him, her red gown whispering over the rushes. "You think you are alone in that?" Stannis thought he was the sword of the morning light. He thought all his sacrifices prepared the way for his glory. In the end, he was only preparing the ground for someone else's step. "My mistake was thinking the story was about him. And now you think it's about me," Jon said flatly. "No," she said. "I think it is about the world. About whether it burns in one night of glorious light or freezes in 1,000 unending shadows. You are a piece on the board, that is all. But you are a piece neither side fully understands. That gives you power, if you choose to use it instead of being moved." "Pieces don't choose," Jon said. "Players do." "Forgive an old woman her clumsy metaphor," Melisandre said with a ghost of a smile. "The game board is cracked. The players are half asleep. The pieces are walking about with knives. That's what happens when gods half-wake and men think themselves their hands." Bran's lips twitched, almost a smile. "She's right. In her way. You said there was a road where Daenerys and I break the sword," Jon said to Bran. "What does that mean?" "It means you refuse the old pattern," Bran said. "Azor Ahai and Nissa Nissa. Fire and blood. Love and sacrifice. It means you don't stab anyone in the heart to wake a sword. It means you learn to bear two powers in one life without letting them tear you apart." Jon let out a short, humorless laugh. "And how do I do that?" Bran's gaze drifted to Melisandre. "With her fire, with my roots, with your stubbornness, with the choices Sansa makes here in the north, and the ones a dragon queen makes across the sea, with Arya's knives, with Davos's words, with a great many small things that don't look like magic at all." "Magic is the pattern beneath small things," Melisandre murmured. "Like the heat in a coal that looks dead, until you blow." Sansa exhaled sharply. "While you discuss patterns and coals, there are lords to feed and arm, grain stores to manage, ravens to send, messages to answer. If this war is truly coming, we must be ready in ways we understand. Winterfell cannot fight gods, but it can feed men who do." Jon nodded, grateful for something solid. "Do what you need to, Sansa. You know this keep better than I ever did." She hesitated, then touched his arm. "If you must walk among gods, fine. Just come back to us when you're done. Don't get lost in their games." He looked at Bran, then at Melisandre, then at the heart of the fire. "I'll try," he said. Later, when the hall had emptied and the sounds of Winterfell's rest filled the night, Jon stood again in the Godswood. This time, Melisandre stood beside him, the red of her gown a wound in the white landscape. "You should be cold," he said. "I am," she replied, "but I have grown accustomed to carrying my own warmth. Your gods don't like me. They don't like what you've done. Nor do I some days," she said. "I have burned men who might have lived. I have saved men who went on to kill others. I have heard my God whisper lies and truth in the same breath. Faith is not a pure thing. It is smoke." Jon stared at the heart tree. "What are we doing here?" "Introducing your roots to my flame," Melisandre said simply. "If the old gods claimed you when you died, and R'hllor claimed you when you returned, then both have a hand on your soul. Left to themselves, they will tear you in two, unless you make them touch instead of pull." He frowned. "How?" Melisandre stepped closer to the tree. Her breath puffed white. "The last time fire and the old magic crossed, the world changed. A sword woke, a night ended, a wound opened that has never healed. The others were driven back, but not destroyed. The bound thing was never unbound. It only slept. Now it wakes because you did. I didn't wake anything, John said through his teeth. I just didn't stay dead. In this world, that is never just, Melisandre said. Kneel, put your hand on the tree. I will call the fire. We will see if the two can coexist in you without burning you to ash or freezing you solid. That doesn't sound reassuring, John muttered. Nothing worth doing ever is, Melisandre replied. Do you trust me? He thought of Shireen, of the crying child on the pyre, of Davos's face, carved with grief, of the weight of his own death and the rush of air into his lungs when the darkness spat him out. He hated her. He owed her. He didn't know. No, he said, but I trust Bran, and he says we need you. Then trust his trust, Melisandre said. Kneel, Jon Snow, or stand. It makes very little difference to the gods. He knelt in the snow. Ghost settled at his side, a silent sentinel. Jon laid his palm on the heart tree's trunk. The bark was cold, almost painfully so. He felt the faint thrum beneath it. Not a heartbeat, exactly, but something like the slow, patient pulse of sap. Melisandre stood behind him, so close he could feel the heat of her body even rough their cloaks. In the name of R'hllor, the Lord of Light, she murmured, who casts down darkness and shows the true road, I call the fire that burns between worlds. Come, meet the roots that remember. Find harmony, if it is there to find. Jon felt it before he saw it. A spark, far away and very near, as if a coal had been dropped into the pit of his stomach. Warmth spread through his ribs, his chest, his throat. His breath came faster, frosting in the air. The heart tree shuddered. The carved face seemed to deepen, its mouth opening in a silent cry. The red leaves above rustled violently, though no wind blew. The warmth became heat. It flowed from his chest up his arm into his hand, and from there into the bark. For an instant he felt the tree as he had never felt anything. An immense, sprawling awareness, a web of roots and branches and memory stretching from Winterfell to the wall to beyond, through every godswood, every stone where first men had prayed and died. The fire hit that web. He expected an explosion, flash, a scream. Instead, there was a hiss, like hot iron plunged into snow. Images crashed through his head. Not his memories, not entirely. A man kneeling before a red-leaved tree, blood dripping from his sword onto the roots. A woman with hair like wildfire calling down a comet. The Night King reaching out a hand as if to touch a flame and recoiling when it licked his fingers. A dragon's shadow passing over a field of white trunks. They collided and tangled. Fire sought to run along the pathways of memory like molten metal through etched grooves. The roots twisted to avoid it, then turned slowly to meet it. Jon's jaw clenched. He felt as if he were being pulled in every direction at once. His blood sang with heat and ice, with old songs he did not know and new hymns in a language he could not speak. Somewhere, distantly, he heard Melisandre chanting in a tongue older than his house. "Stop!" he gasped. "Enough!" The word did something. The fire faltered, then steadied. The roots withdrew, then eased forward again. Two currents, both stubborn, both lethal, found a rock between them and split around it. "You something vast and cold said. You something vast and hot replied." The two presences, so different and yet so alike in their immensity, circled him like wolves around an unfamiliar packmate. Jon felt 1,000 eyes on him. Eyes of bark, eyes of ember, eyes of bone. He thought of all the times he had stood between two stubborn fools and tried to make them see sense. Felt very much like that and utterly beyond it. "Listen," he rasped, not sure if he spoke aloud or in whatever space he now inhabited. "I don't care what you were. I don't care what you want. The dead are coming. They'll freeze your forests and snuff your fires if they win. You need us. Men, women, dragons, wolves." His throat burned. "You need me. I won't tear myself in half for you. If you want me, you share." For a heartbeat, there was nothing. Then, like a river changing course, something shifted. The fire stopped trying to burn through the roots. It seeped instead into the spaces between them, warming the soil. The roots stopped trying to choke the fire and instead wrapped themselves around its source, containing it, shaping it. The pain lessened. The images slowed. John felt, dimly, his body sag against the tree. Ghost whined softly, pressing closer. Melisandre's hands hovered just above his shoulders, trembling. "Well," she whispered, almost to herself, "that's new." The fire and the roots did not become one. They were never meant to, but in him, for now, they agreed not to fight. His hand slipped from the bark. Darkness rushed up, not like the cold oblivion of his first death, but like the deep, restful black of a long-needed sleep. He dreamed. He stood on a field of snow that stretched in every direction, under a sky like iron. In the far distance, a line of dark trees marked the edge of a forest. To his right, a great fire burned without fuel, a pillar of flame reaching toward the clouds. Shadowy figures moved within it, their faces shifting. Melisandre, Kinvara, R'hllorès, nameless priests, kings and queens whose names the world had forgotten. To his left, a vast tree rose from the ice, its trunk pale as bone, its leaves blood red. Faces swam in its bark. The ground beneath it was riddled with roots that seemed to reach forever down. Between the fire and the tree stood two figures. One was a woman, hair like moonlight, eyes like the amethysts of Valyria. She wore a cloak of black and red. A dragon curled protectively at her back, its scales shimmering with heat. The other was a man with a sword of dull metal at his hip, a cloak of gray around his shoulders, and a white wolf at his side. Daenerys himself. They looked at each other across the snow. Neither moved. "Here we are again," she said. Her breath did not frost the air. Why would it? Fire lived in her lungs. "So it seems," he said. His breath did frost. But lest he seem wholly the North, he felt a flicker of heat in his chest when he looked at her. Not desire, not yet. Recognition. "You stand too close to the trees," Kinvara's voice said from the fire. "Come to us, Azor Ahai. Leave the dead forest to rot." "You stand too close to the flames," came another voice, quieter but no less vast, from the roots. It was the whisper Jon had heard in the Godswood. "Come to us, Wolf of Winter. Leave the fire to burn itself out." Daenerys's eyes flicked between the two forces. "They speak as if we're deaf," she murmured. "They always do," Jon said. "Gods and lords alike." She took a step forward. The dragon behind her rumbled. The fire flared. "If the dead are coming, why are they so intent on tearing us apart first?" "Because they're afraid," Jon said, surprising himself. "Of us, of what happens if we stand together." "And are we so frightening?" she asked, arching a brow. He looked at the dragon, a ghost, at the tree and the fire. "We might be," he said. The snow between them began to crack. Something moved beneath it, slow and heavy. A hand of blue ice thrust up, fingers like spears. "The others," Daenerys said. The fire burned hotter. The tree's roots writhed. The gods' petty quarrel was forgotten in the face of the rising cold. Jon looked at Daenerys. "Whatever they are," he said, nodding toward the fire and the tree. "They need us, and we need each other, whether we like it or not." "Do you like it?" she asked, a spark of wry humor in her eyes even here. He almost smiled. "I don't know you well enough yet to say," she huffed. "Honest, that's something." The ice cracked wider. A pale figure rose, eyes blazing with a blue so cold it hurt to see. The Night King's gaze passed over fire and root and fixed instead on them. "Wake," Bran's voice said in his ear. Jon jerked upright with a strangled gasp. He lay at the base of the heart tree. Ghost's nose was pressed to his cheek, whining softly. The sky overhead had paled from black to deep blue. Dawn brushed the horizon. Melisandre knelt nearby, her hands clasped so tightly the knuckles were white. Bran sat in his chair at the edge of the clearing, Mira behind him, her spear grounded in the snow. "How long was I out?" Jon croaked. "Not long," Bran said. Time moves oddly when you're with them. Here, it's been perhaps an hour. Melisandre let out a breath that shook. You took both into you, she whispered. I did not think it possible. Neither did they, I think. A thin, sharp smile touched her lips. You may have surprised your gods, Jon Snow. Good, he muttered, hauling himself to his feet with Ghost's help. Someone ought to. He staggered but did not fall. He felt different. Not stronger exactly, not weaker, as if a space that had been empty in him since he returned from death had been filled. Not wholly, not cleanly, but filled. Bran watched him with those new old eyes. You saw her, he said, in the place between. Jon said quietly. Daenerys. She's dreaming too, Bran murmured. In her own fires. The gods are impatient. They're already throwing you together in visions before you've even met. Jon thought of the wolf and the dragon standing between tree and fire, the crack in the ice. Then we'd better meet properly before they decide to shove us harder. Melisandre rose, brushed snow from her knees. You will need to go to her, she said. Fire does not come north without a reason. If she comes on her own, it will be as conqueror. If you go first, it might be as ally. Jon looked at the wall, a pale line in his mind, at Winterfell's towers, at the heart tree's face. I can't leave the north now, he said. Not with the dead marching. The dead are still some distance, Bran said. They will come, but not tomorrow. The dragons are closer than you think. If you do not shape that meeting, others will. The Red Priests, Southern Lords, old hatreds, old fears. Go to Dragonstone. Go to her. Talk, before you fight. And who guards the north while I play the envoy? Jon demanded. Sansa's voice spoke from behind him, steady and cool. I will, she said. I told you once. You are good at war, Jon. I am good at the rest. Let me do my part. Let me hold Winterfell while you go find this dragon queen and make certain she doesn't roast us to prove how pious she is to her red god. He turned. She stood at the edge of the clearing, cloak drawn tight, her breath fogging the air. There was fear in her eyes, yes, but also resolve. I won't leave you alone with this, he said. You're not, she replied. You're leaving me with half the north and a small boy who's older than both of us. And Arya when she comes home. And Brienne. And the men who chose you for their king and might yet accept me as their lady. We've faced worse with less. He wanted to argue, to say that he had come back once and might not again. But the words stuck. He thought instead of the wolf and the dragon, the crack in the ice, the gods looming uselessly on either side. All right, he said at last. I'll go, but I won't kneel to her god, or to her. Not unless it's for more than southern pride. Melisandre smiled faintly. Lawler does not require kneeling, only sacrifice. Jon shot her a dark look. I'm fresh out of burning children. If your god wants more blood from me, he can come ask himself. The red woman's eyes flickered. He already has, she murmured, and you told him to share. I do not think he has decided yet whether to be insulted or intrigued. Bran's gaze went distant, as if listening to something Jon could not hear. He'll be both, he said. They both will. But they can't touch you now without touching each other. That frightens them more than any Night King. Good, Jon said. Maybe they'll be too busy being afraid to meddle. Bran actually laughed, a short, startled sound. You don't know gods, Jon. Then we'll teach them, Jon said. We've taught kings before. It's no different. Kings die, Melisandre said softly. Gods do not. Maybe they should, Jon replied. He left the Godswood with Ghost at his heels and Winterfell before him, a gray shape in the dim morning light. Behind him, the heart tree's leaves rustled. For the first time in his life, Jon did not feel watched when he walked away from its gaze. He felt accompanied. When Daenerys stepped onto the black stone of Dragonstone's shore, the wind off the narrow sea whipped her hair and filled her lungs with salt and memory. She had never seen this island before, not truly, but she had dreamed of it. Stories told to her as a child had painted it in colors of smoke and blood. Aegon's fortress, his first foothold, a place of storms and dragons. Now it was hers. Gray waves crashed against jagged teeth of rock. The great, carved dragons that flanked the causeway loomed overhead, mouths frozen mid-roar. Above them, the castle rose from the stone. Like part of it, towers and walls of dark basalt, windows like hungry eyes. Tyrion Lannister stood beside her, his cloak snapping in the wind. His mismatched eyes narrowed as he studied the fortress. "Not subtle, the Targaryens," he remarked. "But then, conquering seldom is." Daenerys let her gaze travel up the steps to the main gate. "This was where my ancestors began," she murmured, "before they crossed with fire and blood, before they broke the kingdoms and forged them into one." "Is that what you intend?" Tyrion asked mildly. "To break and forge again?" She thought of the fire visions, of the man in the snow, of the burning forest. "I intend to break chains," she said, "and perhaps some crowns. What remains after, we will see." She started up the stairs, Grey Worm and Missandei at her side, the Unsullied and Dothraki below. Drogon swooped overhead, roaring, his shadow covering the sea. Rhaegal and Viserion followed, smaller, eager. As she climbed, something tugged at her attention. Not the fire in her blood, nor the weight of destiny. Something older, colder. She paused, one hand on the rough stone of the wall. Felt wrong. Not wrong in the way Slaver's Bay had felt, full of cruelty and wasted lives. Wrong like a voice cut off mid-word, like a mouth sewn shut. "There used to be something here," she said under her breath. Tyrion glanced at her. "Beg pardon, your grace?" "A tree," she said, the certainty surprising her. "A white tree with red leaves. It stood on this island before the castle was built. Before my ancestors came, they cut it down, used its wood to stoke their first fires. The old god's blood burned in the hearths where they planned their war." Tyrion's brows rose. "You've been reading more history than I gave you credit for." "I haven't read this," Daenerys said. "I saw it, in the flames." "And you believe it?" His tone was not quite skeptical, not quite mocking. Curious. "I believe that the past leaves marks," she said. "On stone, on soil, on men's hearts. My family burned this island clean of the old gods before they set their own above the realms. They made a choice. Kinvara says I must make another." "And what choice is that?" Tyrion asked as they resumed climbing. "Whether to burn the North's gods as my ancestors burned this tree," she said, "or to let them stand and risk the cold they shelter." Tyrion snorted. "The Northerners won't thank you for burning anything, gods or not. They barely thanked your father for leaving them alone most days. And he stopped doing even that toward the end." "I am not my father," Daenerys said, the words automatic. She stopped herself from saying more. She had repeated that phrase so often it was becoming a shield she hid behind, not a truth she built upon. "No," Tyrion said, "you're not. You ask questions he never would have. That's something. Just be cautious whose answers you trust." "Yours?" she asked, a hint of challenge in her voice. "Mine, when they concern wine and politics," Tyrion said cheerfully. "Less so when gods enter the matter. My experience with them runs toward unkind humor." They reached the top of the stairs. The main gates of Dragonstone stood open, as if the castle had been waiting. For a moment, Daenerys imagined she saw a dragon's eye open in the stone above, regarding her with ancient, patient interest. Inside, the great hall was cold and dusty, its long table layered in debris. Dragon-carved supports rose on either side, their stone wings arching overhead. At the far end, beneath a window shaped like a pointed eye, the throne of Dragonstone loomed. A jagged chair of black stone, carved to resemble fused swords and dragon bones. "Home," she murmured. "Of a sort," Tyrion said. "We'll need fire in here, and food, and a plan. And allies," she said. "What word from the north?" "Ravens from White Harbor and Deepwood Motte," Tyrion said, consulting a scroll. Lord Manderly hedges his bets as ever. Promises support if you prove yourself friend to the North. That likely means not burning Winterfell. Lady Glover says the North remembers, which is a polite way of telling you to go hang until you prove you're not your father. And there is this. He held up another, smaller scroll. From a king. Not Cersei, Daenerys said. She would wrap any letter to me in poison, not parchment. Not Cersei, Tyrion agreed. From the king in the north. Jon Snow. The name brushed her mind like a raven's wing. Snow. Wolf. A man in a dream standing before burning trees. What does he say? She asked, holding out her hand. Tyrion passed her the scroll. He says the dead are marching. The Night King leads them. And if we don't stop arguing over whose chair is prettier, we will all freeze together. Daenerys broke the seal and read. The hand was uneven but clear, the words direct. He spoke of the wall, of the dead rising, of White Walkers, of Dragonglass, of a war that would not wait for thrones to be settled. He did not flatter. He did not threaten. He asked. He asked her to meet, to speak of alliance. He asked for her help. He offered what he could. The North's loyalty, their fighting men, his word. He sounds honest, she said reluctantly. He sounds desperate, Tyrion said. Which, in my experience, is when men speak most honestly. I know him, somewhat. We shared the wall for a time. He was a bastard then, nothing more. Now he is a king. Interesting how the world turns. What do you make of him? Daenerys asked. A Stark in all but name, Tyrion said. Grim, honorable, occasionally funny when he forgets himself. He loved his family fiercely. He has seen enough dead to know when he's looking at more. If he says the dead march, I believe him. I would advise you to do the same. Daenerys's fingers tightened on the parchment. The vision from the temple swam up unbidden. The man in the snow, the burning forest. Kinvara says he is touched by the same fire that lives in me, she said. Quietly. Branched, she called it. Divided. She thinks he must choose between our gods. Tyrion made a face. Let's hope he chooses not to go mad and burn people at random. We already tried that in King's Landing. It ended poorly. Daenerys laughed bleakly. You never tire of reminding me what waits if I fail. It's why you keep me, Tyrion said with a little bow. She looked back at the letter. Send word back. Tell him I will receive him here at Dragonstone. Tell him to come, but to come alone as far as his pride can bear. If he brings half the North's army to my doorstep, I'll assume he's here to take the castle, not ask for help. And if he refuses? Tyrion asked. Then he is not the man in the fire, she said. And we will have to find another way. The sea voyage from White Harbor to Dragonstone was miserable. Jon had never liked boats. He preferred things that stayed where they were meant to, like walls and trees and castles. Ships rocked. They creaked. They smelled of tar and sickness and fear. He spent the first day clenched over the rail, emptying the contents of his stomach into the churning gray waters of the narrow sea, and the second with a numb, pounding skull. Davos clapped him companionably on the back as he retched. First voyage is always the worst, lad. Second isn't much better. After that, you only feel like dying a little. Ghost paced the deck uneasily, disliking the unsteady ground. The crew eyed the dire wolf with a mixture of awe and suspicion, muttering prayers to the Seven, the drowned god, and the mother alike. On the third night, as the ship cut southward through black waters, Jon stood on deck with the hood of his cloak up and the stars overhead. The air was salt and cold. The sea hissed against the hull. He could feel them now more clearly than before. The roots, the fire, they did not speak in words. They pulsed, like distant thunder. You're quiet, Davos said, joining him at the rail. I'm listening, Jon said. To what? Everything. Davos snorted. Try not to listen too hard. That way lies madness and religion. Is there a difference? Jon murmured. Only in how much wine's involved, Davos said cheerfully. He sobered. How do you feel? After what you did with the tree. Like I've swallowed a coal and a handful of ice, Jon said slowly. They're not fighting as much. Not now. But they're watching each other. Through me. Through her. He stared at the horizon. Sometimes I think I can feel her. Daenerys. As if someone lit a beacon on another shore. You've never met her, Davos pointed out. Don't let your gods tell you who a woman is before you hear it from her own mouth. I won't, Jon said. I saw her. In a dream. Ah, Davos said. Dream women. Even more dangerous than the real kind. Jon almost smiled. You sound like a man with experience. Davos said with feeling. Never trust a dream that tells you what you want to hear, lad. Or one that tells you what you fear most. Those are the easiest lies to swallow. The ship rolled. Jon steadied himself and watched the line where sea met sky. Somewhere beyond it lay Dragonstone. Somewhere between here and there, the gods tugged on threads they had no right to hold. I'm tired of being a piece, he said quietly. I want to be the hand that moves, for once. Then move, Davos said. Speak plain to the Dragon Queen. Don't flatter her. Don't threaten. Tell her the truth. About the dead. About the North. About what you did with that tree and that witch. If she's half the woman her titles claim, she'll see sense. If she doesn't, then we'll know that too. And if she demands error in message stream, retry.